we'll jump straight in. As always, get in touch with us about anything we talk about via DRH Pod on Instagram, the comments below on YouTube, rate and review on Instagram or Apple Podcasts, or just whatever you can do to support us. It's great. We wanted to talk about this week crossovers. So what was originally going to be my what have you been enjoying recently chat on a previous episode turned into this basically. We've recently spoke about cameos and a couple of examples where characters or actors, you know, does it link a film, is it the same world, that sort of stuff. And it made me realise
they can bleed, can't they, on certain, if you got certain aspects of it. The difference is when it's a celebrity or a person cameoing, or if they're cameoing in character, a previously established character. And brings a bit more to it, doesn't it? Really,
exactly. And it made me want to talk about like actual crossovers. We may end up touching on things that are crossovers within an existing universe or existing franchise, but I wanted to highlight a few examples of two separate characters, franchises, worlds, universes, companies that have basically ended up collaborating on a story or multiple stories for a couple of the bigger examples. They're not all great. Sometimes there's a lot of examples out there where it is very much either a cash grab for a company, like a publisher might release a line of books where it's Doctor Who meets the X-Men, Doctor Who meets Star Trek. And there's a lot out there which...
Doctor Who meets a lot of people, apparently.
It's that TARDIS, you can get everywhere with it. And, you know, there'll be a lot out there which are... I like I say, either a cash grab or there might be a passion project. I know there's a few Star Trek novellas which are written by some of the cast where they've crossed over the different teams of Star Trek, or it'll be, you know, Captain Kirk meets whoever. But there's some really good examples out there. One of my all-time favourites, which is what I was reading, which I was originally going to talk about, and I think it's only happened twice. So I'll just jump straight in. So I've recently been rereading the JLA Avengers crossover by Kurt Busiek and George Perez. One of my favourite writer-artist combos from their work on Avengers. And there was this period when I was younger where they did a 4-book run of a story where the Justice League meet the Avengers, basically. Right. It feels a very Thanos-esque story. Basically, there's an all-powerful being who's technically a bit of a scientist. He wants to learn about the origin of the universe, basically. And when he gets very close to finding out how reality and the universe is built, it's destructive and nearly wipes out his own universe. So he gets banished by his own people. And they basically say, we won't kill you, even though you've caused lots of destruction, but we're going to basically break up your immortal form, your atoms, and turn you to a being of energy. So you will exist, but you won't be able to influence. But basically, you know, it's a comic book. He ends up being able to tap into...
that sounds like a lot of hard work, just killing.
He basically ends
a job there, aren't you, lads?
Yeah. And he basically ends up tapping into other universes to learn the secret of their reality. Right. But in him doing so, it basically destroys the fabric of that reality, and he goes from universe to universe. Gets to the point where he
doesn't learn his lesson, does he?
No, and it ends up being that the DC main continuity universe and the Marvel main continuity universe end up touching into each other because of what he's doing. And, you know, and here we go, I smell a story.
Hilarity ensues.
It does lead into the thing that everyone always seems to go to first of, wouldn't it be cool if the Justice League and the Avengers had a fight? And there is always that thing of, again, there's the Avengers versus X-Men comic book story, and people have spoken the films. Oh, when the Fantastic Four or when the X-Men come to the MCU, let's see them fight. It's like, just let's see them work together, you know.
Hey, mate, previous conversations we've had about, like, playing computer games with mates and stuff. I'm way more about the sort of working together on things. Yeah. So for me, it's like, I don't want them to fight. They're the good guys.
Exactly. Surely they can recognise that they're the good guys.
Yeah.
Something that this does do, though, and sets it up quite nicely, it takes advantage of the opportunity to, some ways, critique, but bare minimum do some commentary on the differences between the two. So it talks about so when the Avengers end up in the DC universe, they start to talk about how polished and almost crass and commercial it feels, how you've got the likes of Superman and Wonder Woman on like advertising billboards for toothpaste, and they're not advertising like overly commercial and negative products. It's all helpful and healthy stuff, but it's also feels very like, are they getting residuals off this? Are they cashing in on being a hero? This is weird. And almost feels a bit false and a bit like, a bit polished. And then you get the reaction of the Justice League coming into the Marvel universe, where you've got it's a little more real. It's more based in our reality.
Yeah.
You've got the thing of regular humans hating mutants and oppressing them and chasing them out in the street, which obviously reflects the idea of racism and inequality and talks about real themes.
There's a message in there, isn't there? Really?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so then it gives the Justice League chance to comment on why are the heroes going out fighting robots and wizards? There's real issues right here. What are they doing to prevent this? Why are they not more... If people don't respect the iconography of their heroes, then the heroes aren't doing enough socially and at the ground level.
Yeah.
And it doesn't delve too much into things like that, but there's a lot of little chances where you've got the big action set pieces. It's a big multi-universal story, and you've got the characters fighting each other.
Which I don't think people would ever forgive either of the publishers if they didn't do that.
No, exactly.
Come on.
But it takes these little moments to... It'll take a quiet moment to weigh up these things. This is literally one of my favourite scenes, if you want to call it that, in all comics ever, where there's and it's beautifully drawn as well. We'll throw some images up here. When I say we, Charlie, I like to give him work. There's some beautifully drawn panels where, and it's so cinematic. We've spoke before about this. There's a rooftop scene. It's raining. There's thunder and lightning. It's nighttime. They're fighting each other.
It smells like a 90s music video.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
It's grungy. There's a metal soundtrack.
Two mortals fighting in the background with swords. There's lightning.
And basically, you've got these panels in between the big, bright, flashy ones where, like, Wonder Woman and Wonder Man are fighting, and Thor and Superman are smashing each other in buildings and all this, and there's all these lasers and powers and bright flashes. And then you've got Captain America and Batman, who are the military or the detective type. They're the thinkers, they're the tacticians. Captain America's technically a super soldier, but he's basically the most a human could ever get power-wise. Yeah. You've got Batman, who's the most you could get training-wise. And they're weighing each other up, and they hit each other a few times, and it talks in the text bubbles, the word balloons, about how they're not really hitting each other full force. They're kind of a little tap and a feint, a little tap and a feint, a little movement, a little testing each other.
Yeah.
And then they both take a moment and go, this isn't right. Why? Something's happening. And then they basically quietly exit to see what's actually really going on. And this is sad. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it, honestly, because it's like two of my favourite characters.
Nice. It's nice to see, though. Like, I love it when people are reciting or talking about a property that they love, and that is it's affected them, enough for them to actually get excited about it. We live in a world of beige a lot of the time. So when these things do come along and they impact you, it's a great thing.
I
mean, it's the whole reason we do the pod in the first place, isn't it?
Exactly. So, I mean, this I mean, the book, when I don't know off the top of my head when it was originally published, but it's probably close to 20 years old at this point. Maybe 20 years old. Mm-hmm. But there's still moments of the story that are so ingrained in my mind, and that, I mean, it's two of my favourite characters in comics and in films and generally.
Yeah.
And the idea that they don't just go, rah, just smash them into each other and who's stronger? Well, Captain America's stronger, but Batman's, smarter. And it's like they instantly recognise Superman, Thor, Iron Man, Wonder Woman. These are the leaders, quote unquote. These are the superpowers. These are the god level. But these two are like, no. I think you're really the brains behind. No, I think you're more dangerous. No, you're. It's not a bromance, but there's this respect.
Yeah.
And you get little moments where Captain America's sat in the Batcave with Batman, and then he's like, we need a way to jump between dimensions and go around. And then Captain America calls up Ben Grimm, who turns up on the Fantastic Four time bike, and he's like, who the hell is this? And he's like, oh, this is a friend. He's a little rough around the edges, but I trust him with my life. And it's like, this is the best of what comics can be. Not just the big, literally, outer world stuff, but moments of characters talking to each other and us as an audience seeing a different side to the character through them interacting with it. I love it.
It's a weird one for me with it, because as much as I have particular characters in each of the big two that I really, really love, and I could actually make the argument that certain characters work better on their own if you imagine them in a world without the other ones.
Yeah.
But the thing that I struggle with, and it's really definitely a first world problem, is that they're few and far between the crossovers, and they don't tend to go back into their individual publishers and carry on with the fallout as much as Do you know what I mean? It's very much on its own, sort of situationally.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean from that? So if you were to be like, all right, well, I'm getting into comic books and I'm just going to go with the crossover ones, it's like, whoa, you're not going to have a lot to read.
Well, yeah,
you are going to have a lot to read, but you're not.
Yeah. No, if you want specifically, if you want to see Batman chatting to Captain America, there's one, maybe two examples. So there's this run of books that I'm reading at the moment. There was the Amalgam era, which was when we would have been very young, and I purposely didn't research it for this because I thought, as a nice little thing, let's both go away and have a read, and maybe in a future episode we'll talk about it, because I know it's quite divisive.
Is that the one where they merge characters?
And this is where it differed from. It wasn't necessarily a crossover of, let's see, Batman and Captain America have a quick boxing match and then go work something out. It was more like Wolverine and Batman, I think, were combined into a character, and whilst that is interesting, there's definitely something to, let's take two, in comics terms, especially at that point, let's take two of the biggest franchises in the world with some of the biggest characters in the world, and let's just see them interact and not just fight each other. Let's see them have conversations. Let's see how they work together. I think it happens. I think legitimate crossovers happens way more in comics. But there's loads of examples out there. Like Batman, who we've just been talking about. There's a lot of Batman meets or Batman versus out there. It's like another one, for example, Batman versus Predator, which I've got the second or third of. I think there's 5 or 6 altogether.
That title it just throws me completely. Like, who? I kind of feel like, were they just writing down like titles and stuff? Apparently two-handed, that's why I'm doing it, writing ambidextrous at the same time.
Yeah.
And then just throwing them, and whatever landed on the table was like, and we're doing Batman versus Predator. There we go.
Yeah.
There's that one. Batman versus Thomas the Tank Engine. Fuck it, let's do it. Let's see what happens here.
But yeah, I mean, again, that's a story that it's not groundbreaking, but I enjoy it. I really enjoy that particular one. I've not read all of the Batman versus Predators, as if that's a thing. All of them, as well as more than one. It's great, isn't it? Really are spoiled if you're a comic book fan. But yeah, it's not groundbreaking, but again, it doesn't feel like a huge cash-in, because it's interesting to see. In that case, it's basically Predators are in Batman's universe. It's not as though the film dimensions hit the comic. It's basically there's a planet somewhere in the DC universe, and it's got.
So it's not this big event that's brought them together. It's like no, they've always existed, and it just happens to be that they're meeting up at that point.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just interesting to see, like, okay, let's say the world's greatest detective against the world of the universe's greatest hunter. There's something like, okay, I get that. And at this point, I don't want to see a conversation. I do want to see the fight, because this makes sense. I think there's Batman versus Aliens. Batman meets Judge Dredd.
Because Alien are technically in the same universe as the Predators. Like that's that was established in Predator 2, but then we've obviously had the AVP films and the backpedaling around that and stuff. So it's not like
and I think that may have started in the comics as well, because maybe Dark Horse, who do a lot of film licensing and book licensing and adaptations, I think they originally did like Alien versus Predator legit, and then like you say in Predator 2 there's the Xenomorph skull, which it's like at that point it's a cameo, but then since then we've had the Alien versus Predator films, so it's all official.
This isn't the cameo episode, Lewis. That was, you had your opportunity to bring that in last time. This is crossovers. I do apologise. I don't know why he's like this.
But yeah, it's just something that there's a part of me that wants to say I'd like to see it more, and maybe across more media. But then I don't know if there's tons of great examples. And I know you had a couple you wanted to talk about as well.
Yeah, I mean, talking about like I think if they did more of it, it would feel less special. For instance, when the Marvel and DC, like the fact that you want to see it, that is part of the excitement of it. I mean, there's the whole, I was going to say logistics side behind it, but I don't really mean that. I mean, like if they do fight each other, it's, are DC going to let one of their heroes bow to the might of a Marvel hero? And there's that sort of like agreeing, like who's allowed to win in a fight and who can take the most amount of punishment and come back for it, and who eventually emerges, victorious, because a DC going to want one of their guys, losing, and Marvel going to want one of theirs. So there is that side of it, but I think that's probably not the money side of it, but the sort of the non-artistic side of it. That
like the business,
unfortunately
or the
or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, because a lot of the things that we talk about, you need that money behind it, and if you don't have those those non-artistic people involved, it just isn't going to get made. So they both, the art side and the capital side of it, do work together, and it's definitely necessary. But it is an interesting thing when the two franchises come together, which, if anything, gives more sort of power to my want of them just work together straight away. Just go into the world and go, you're the hero of this world, well I'm the hero of our world, so if you've done this, nah mate, oh neither have I, should we try and work together and find out who has? Okay, that'd be a good idea, said Batman in the northern accent.
He's a good gritty Batman, this one.
Oh yeah, he's going for the BAFTA, mate. I've got a couple examples of crossovers. One, if you squint and tilt to the left, it kind of is a crossover. At least a crossover in spirit. Psycho.
Right, okay.
The movie. I always watch Psycho, and not always. Before realising this, I would always forget the beginning of Psycho and assuming it starts with her pulling into the Bates Motel. Yeah. But it doesn't. It starts with her essentially robbing her boss. Yeah. So it's like a heist. So it's a heist movie. Yeah. The basic setup is that her boyfriend is... It's kind of looked as if he's manipulating her to steal a load of money from her work. She's supposed to put the money, or take the money to the post office, or put the money in the safe. And no one's going to know it's not there until Monday. So it's a Friday. So she's got the whole weekend to get out of Dodge, essentially. And her boyfriend says that. So she nicks the money and drives and goes. So it's a heist movie. She then her heist movie bumps into this psycho living in a house at a hotel. And those two movies collide. And then the third movie amalgamation from them. The crossover carries on going.
Yeah, I'd say it's more of a genre mashup. I think that's...
No, I'm having it. It's a crossover, Lewis. I'm having it.
But I think a few of Hitchcock's films, to be fair, there are references and there are like the idea of a shared universe and things like that. Which, I know what you mean. Have you got any like full franchise ones? Like,
well, I mean, Supernatural, the TV show. I love that TV show. I'll talk about it more after I've said about the crossover. But there's a legitimate crossover with Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
And it's a great episode. Every character in it, as in the real life human characters from Supernatural.
Yeah.
In the episode, they go into the Scooby-Doo world, so they become animated. But they don't break character. They're the same people all the way through it. And even though they're aimed at completely different audiences, the Scooby-Doo characters manage to retain their full characters all the way through it. So they don't suddenly become like, more action-packed or, they don't fall in line with the ways of working of, the brothers out of Supernatural. They stay on point to who they are, which is great because you got Dean trying to like chat up the girls in it and stuff. And it's really good. I mean, I think it's Hanna-Barbera in it that do the animation.
Scooby-Doo,
Yeah, and at the time, like Hanna-Barbera were a massive company churning out loads of properties and stuff. But fast forward to now, their style I think stands up more now because it's become an actual Hanna-Barbera style.
Yeah,
because nothing else is similar to it. It's that sort of the Flintstones, the Jetsons, that sort of bad but good.
Yeah, low budget, but with care and with heart.
And animation studios have brought things out in more recent time, other studios that are based on that, but it's always based on the Hanna-Barbera stuff. And the episode's really good, and it's full canon for Supernatural. I'm not sure where it sits with full canon for Scooby-Doo, but nothing happens to the characters that wouldn't, make sense within the Scooby-Doo universe.
Yeah, like Fred gets his head taken off by a vampire, and you're like, oh, the next series of Scooby-Doo is going to be really weird.
Or something irreparably happens, like emotionally, to Daphne, and in the rest of the Scooby-Doo episode, she's just like a shivering wreck in the corner. Like.
Scooby gets his tail docked. They pin his ears to make him scarier for the monsters. I don't agree with either of those things, by the way. For dog lovers,
just let the dogs be. Let them be.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally really like Supernatural anyway, and unfortunately, I knew of the episode before seeing the episode.
Oh.
Yeah, gutted when it happened. I was like, oh, this would have been great if this had just.
Yeah.
If it was the whole because I'd be constantly thinking, oh, this is going to be a dream sequence, or they're going to come out of this quite quickly.
Checking your drink, like vodka.
Rhiannon, what have you done? So I did know of it. Supernatural is a weird show because it definitely is one of those properties that I'm guessing was low enough budget for even when it wasn't getting loads and loads of traction and wasn't this big show that everyone was in love with, it was getting enough views that could justify the budget that it was getting.
Yeah.
It wasn't to the later seasons where they had actual reoccurring locations that they would go back to. And even because basically the brothers, Dean and Sam, are traveling all over America. They go to a hotel and it's the same hotel set decorated differently every time.
Nice.
Yeah. So they had no sets. It was all on location shooting. When I say no sets, there probably was the odd one that they reused and redressed.
But they don't have to build the Batcave.
Every time. And it's a perfect example of first episode, last season, random episode, put them back to back, unrecognisable as a show. It definitely found its feet probably around season 2, season 3, maybe a little bit later, where the two leads, Sam and Dean, their sort of bromance from real world definitely spills into the show, and it allows them, because there's obviously such a trust between them as people and as actors, that they can take the whatever they're doing so much further because of that level of like trust that they've got in each other. And it definitely does show. Like, they look like they're having a great time in the bloopers and stuff that you see. But it starts out almost like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer / X-Files sort of TV show, and it's got some darker moments in the later seasons. But in the beginning, it was kind of like, you know, monster hunting got sexy, and it's these two strapping young lads, and it was definitely pitched at like, these are good looking lads, but guess what, they can fight as well. But then later on it's like, you know what, they're actually really funny, and they get the opportunity to stretch their legs in some really quite deep, dark acting moments. And in the stories as well, like when they start messing around with time, and there's a bit where one of them goes to hell. Spoiler, it's a show about demons and hell and stuff like that. One of them goes to hell, and they get him back a year later. But then it leaks in drips and drabs that, oh, a year in hell. Oh, it's not a year. It's like thousands of years that they've been tortured. And then when you realise that as an audience member, you're kind of looking at the character in the distance going, bloody hell, like, he has gone through some shit. So when he's saying like, oh, I don't really want to talk about it, it's like, yeah, I'd probably leave it. I probably wouldn't talk to him about it. But I've still not finished it. I'm on a bit of a cliffhanger end of a particular season, and I do want to get back into it. But I'm watching so much other things at the moment that I don't want to. It's like, do you ever have that, like the run of like A-list properties that you're either reading, watching, or whatever, and it's like, I'm at a good point where I'm on a hiatus with them. I've got other things that I want to watch and I'm enjoying. I'll wait until I've cleared a bit of the diary, and then I'll get back on with that, because I like it so much that it needs a bit more of my concentration. I mean, it's something we've probably spoke about on here before, but because I'll tend to have maybe 2 or 3 books at the time that I'm reading, but it might be I'll tend to have like a sci-fi, military, action-y book, and then I might have like a horror book, and then I might have like something that's a bit deeper or a bit thicker, where I think, oh, I've got to be, if I'm tired, I don't want to sit and keep reading Dune because it's so heavily written. It's like reading a religious text that happens to be cool and sci-fi, but it's like, this isn't like a wind down before bed kind of read necessarily. I've definitely got that. Yeah, there's things that there's podcasts and YouTube channels that I specifically know I'm going to watch and listen to at night. But then there's other things that I'm like, you know what, I need to be more on my game, not less on my game, to be watching, listening, reading this.
Definitely.
The days have gone now where I read comic books in bed, because I'm that shattered when I'm getting into bed. It's like I'm reading the same page here, like again and again, and then forgetting what's going on. And I was reading.
That's on a good day for Charlie. That as
well. That's on a good day. You bought me Cowl. Was it Cowl?
Yeah.
So really, really enjoying it. But I got to a point where I was having to flick back to the beginning of the book where it gives you a breakdown of who is what, and I was like, why am I doing this on every page? I'm not in the right place here. I'm forgetting who someone is part way through, and it's really starting to not affect my enjoyment of it, but it's affecting.
It takes you out the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I was like, got to put this down, put it aside, come back to it when I'm in a better energy sort of situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've spoke on recent episodes about, obviously with lockdown lifting, we've been able to go out and do dog walks together and be a bit more active. I've tried to get more stuff for the house, more for the garden, more decorating, more stuff. And obviously now that the gyms are back open, I'm massively back into that. And even on a day when I've like really hit it hard with, I'm doing like 2 or 3 workouts a day at the moment, basically. Because I've seen what I look like on this, and I'm like, oh, and it gets to the point where if I'm in bed and I want to quickly read something, certain books I just cannot do it because I'm so physically tired that, like you say, mentally, I was doing the same thing where I'd be reading something and going, who's this character? And it's like,
yeah,
they've been in the whole book. So it's like, put it down.
The book's named after them.
Yeah, like, exactly. Yeah, who's this Batman it keeps talking about?
But then sometimes they call him Bruce.
He's never played cricket in his life.
Oh my god, that would be such a great Elseworld comic called Batman, and it's just a dude with various bats.
Elseworlds is something we want to talk about. We keep teasing episodes at the moment. Elseworlds is something I want to talk about soon, and on alternate versions on that subject. Because
some of them are just brilliant, aren't they?
Something I've been reading recently is one of the Elseworld type books, and again I was like, there's some good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah. Are there any other sort of straight crossovers you want to talk about before we go into stuff we'd like to see or things that we've imagined?
Yeah, I imagine this whole thing.
Shut the fuck up.
Come on, want to quickly mention that I've not yet jumped into. One of my things in lockdown was to complete the Kingdom Hearts series,
right?
Which for those who don't know is basically Final Fantasy. I know that doesn't on its own doesn't mean anything, but characters from across the Final Fantasy games, their universe is smashed into the Disney universe, and by Disney universe I mean weird. Everything.
Yeah. It's such on paper again. It's like the Batman versus Predator thing. You go, really?
Yeah.
But I mean, they're doing well.
Yeah. It works for the games. It is one of the biggest JRPGs out there, I'd argue. It's something that it's one of those games that I love the iconography of it. I love the design. I love the designs of like the actual keyblades and the actual hearts and all. Where every single one you'd go, oh, that's a tattoo. You'd have to change it at all. Just stick it there. Yeah, the heart with the key. Yeah, every little image and little design works. But then also the juxtaposition of the style and version of the Final Fantasy characters that they use next to the Disney characters, although it's literally worlds apart, it works. It just works perfectly. It's like you say, it's one that on paper you would maybe question and go, I think other stuff could easily merge with Disney better. But and maybe that's why it works.
Yeah. Well, this is it. That's what I was going to say. Like the challenge is seemingly so much harder than than you'd want it to be. But if you manage to pull it off, like the reward is so much richer because of it. But I've only played snippets of it, the first one. But again, it's because I've got so much other stuff going on. But from an artistic point of view, like as in character design and stuff like that, it looks so good. And you mentioned like the blades mixed with the keys and that. The blades and the gun blades and things from Final Fantasy were always one of the massive things for me, especially like in Final Fantasy 7 and I think is it 8 or is it 9 with Squall Lionheart in it, where he has the revolver that is the blade and stuff, and you had to time the slash with the trigger action for him to shoot, and it gives it more power on the blade comes down and nice, and all sorts of stuff. So I always really liked the sort of the design around that. So then you mix it in with the keys that are, from the from from Kingdom Hearts. It's a really cool aesthetic.
Yeah.
Put together thing.
With each sequel, with each spin-off and newer version of the game, there's more Disney characters and universes explored, and obviously the newer ones. So I think there is another sequel. There was a game released not long ago, but I don't think it was a full sequel. I think it was one of the smaller spin-off games.
Okay.
But I mean, you can get apart from the most recent one, you can get like bundles on PlayStation Store, or you can get game like what I got, which was the physical copies of the whole run together.
Nice.
So that's something that maybe me and you, once we can be inside together as well, a bit easier. Weird wording. We'll be able to sit and play it, I think, and talk about it on the pod.
Oh God. Oh yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine? We can only dream of the day, Lewis. It's funny. We've actually got a few games that I think films. I mean, we probably watch films probably quite different to the majority of people. Like we don't really have a problem with pausing something or saying the odd thing between each other while we're watching.
You might not.
Or having either a big conversation before it. There's a lot of dialogue. But I think conversations like that and that feeling is a bit more applicable to gaming.
Yeah.
So I think watching stuff apart or watching stuff together isn't that big of a difference. But gaming, for me, it's like for me, everything could be two-player, especially on the games that I play, where it's like, you're solving a puzzle or whatever. It's like I might be controlling the character, but we're both in on this.
Yeah,
we're both giving up like our thoughts of what we should do, where we should go, and vice versa. And I think there's definitely a couple of games on that we've got on our sort of imaginary game list that we want to play. Probably think about recording some actual game footage and throwing that into an episode of what we've been up to and stuff. But I think a game heavy pod is definitely on the list.
Yeah, definitely. And let's speaking of pie in the sky thinking, I thought it'd be fun if we've not spoke to each other beforehand about this beforehand, as in our choices. Let's talk about some crossovers we'd like to see, basically. Right. Even if it's definitely not going to happen, obviously. What would, or maybe some bad examples that we think someone would probably pitch and maybe wouldn't get made.
So I've got a bit of a yarn to tell. So when I first played Fallout 4, I was also watching Humans, the is it a BBC program?
Channel 4, maybe.
Is it Channel 4? Yeah. I was watching Humans and and Westworld as well, and it's all about synthetic life and artificial intelligence and all that sort of stuff. So my play of Fallout 4 is super influenced by how I felt about these synths in these other properties. But it got me thinking about what worlds would I like to see come together. Not necessarily characters, but worlds coming together.
Yeah.
The Blade Runner and Alien worlds, apparently that's already a thing. That on the DVD release of Prometheus, is it Wayland? Yeah, there's a letter between him and Tyrell from Blade Runner about how his robots went wrong. So I was like, oh right, okay, I thought I'd invented something, but apparently the people who own the properties actually already invented it. So they picked me to the post with their own thing. Right, never mind. But I've always thought that Blade Runner, if you squint, and I say this a lot, I've started to say this a lot, if you squint and look to the left a little bit, Blade Runner could go into the Matrix and have that as a shared universe. Okay, yeah. Almost like, they talk about how the synthetic lives revolt against them and it starts a war. Ignore the sequel of Blade Runner and think of the original one. I feel like that could quite easily morph straight into the pre-existing world of the Matrix. And then I know there's a fourth Matrix film coming out, but I would love to see a film which bridged those two together. So seeing parts of the war and then seeing how we end up becoming batteries. I mean, they're humans, I'm human. But kind of seeing those two go together, I think it'd be very stylistically very different properties. Yeah. But I think that I can already imagine that as a crossover world existence anyway.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think because Blade Runner is almost the original cinematic cyberpunk or future dystopian sci-fi, whatever that a lot of things sort of play off now. One for me is Ghost in the Shell and the Blade Runner world, and it's that's one of those that you can probably just imagine it's in the same world if you want to, and it doesn't negatively impact it in any way. But I do like the idea of a Blade Runner, reaching out to Section 9 and saying, "Oh, I need some help with a case. You guys are apparently pretty good," and just something very.
That's
just something
the problem
very, it doesn't have to impact the actual Blade Runner franchise.
I think that's the problem that I look at mine and go Blade Runner and The Matrix. There'd have to be a lot of story to link those two, and it would be one film, the other film, and the bridge in between them. But I think yours is a perfect example of something that could happen right at the same time.
Yeah, definitely, and it could even just
brilliant.
Yeah, it could even just be. So we've been reading one of the Blade Runner comic series that's come out in the past couple of years. And I know that they're doing a origin comic book series about how the Blade Runner squad or unit got set up and why. And I think there's a sequel to the new film or something like that. But basically, it's easily enough to do a spin-off comic from that to do. Oh, this is the time that X Blade Runner met Y person from Section 9. It wouldn't even have to be the Major or Bato. I mean, I'd quite like to see Bato in a Harrison Ford's big trench coat, or him and Deckard together. But it wouldn't even have to be as literal as that. It could just be a Blade Runner comes across a Ghost in the Shell type cyborg or enhanced human, and what does that mean, and how does it impact it?
It could almost be the difference between a street level incident that the Blade Runners would deal, because obviously in the Blade Runner universe, the cops still deal with humans, and anytime there's a replicant side to it, they call the Blade Runners.
Yeah.
Equally, you could then go, well, the Blade Runner is on this case and realizes actually this is a bit outside of my ballpark. I think I need to call in Section 9 for this. It almost could be like a tiered system of them coming into it. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And there's probably a lot of different franchises if you started to go through what are the cool sci-fi near future franchises. A lot of them would probably fit in either Blade Runner or Ghost in the Shell, because I think with both franchises, particularly for the first one, for Blade Runner, the story seems epic, but actually it's just a case that someone's dealing with.
Yeah.
It's
not one of the most beautiful things of the first Blade Runner film that I treasure the most out of it, because in this amazing world that we've been shown, it's a small story.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Like Roy Batty and his allies, the baddies, but they're not out to destroy the world. They're not going to set off a nuclear device and get revenge on humanity. Mm-hmm. They're basically going about the business and getting revenge on their creator or their creators, but they're aware they've got a finite lifespan. They're aware they've only got a certain amount of time. They're not trying to destroy the world. And equally in Ghost in the Shell, especially in, for example, Standalone Complex that we've spoken about recently, the series that we're currently rewatching, a lot of there's certain threats they face where you go, oh, this has consequences outside of their country, outside of their city, outside of their... But a lot of the time it's there's a serial killer who's very much localized to where they're based, or there's heists happening, and they might go to other countries to help. I recently watched the episode where they go to London, for example, and you learn a bit more about internationally how that world is set up. But again, it could be that the Blade Runner unit has to go to wherever Section 9 are properly based. I think in Standalone Complex it's in Japan, but obviously in some of the versions it's not specified. But we've got to go to Japan on this case. Oh, well, you need to reach out to Section 9. Then they're the guys who'll there's just something.
And maybe in the near future, the travel between America and Japan wouldn't feel like this big epic plane journey like that. What is their sort of the power source between a location and another location? Are we dealing with like hours, or is it minutes? You could be on the other side of the planet, so it almost wouldn't have to be this big epic thing of we now need to go to Japan, and there's a whole thing about it's like, oh no, we're just popping on the shuttle plane or whatever, and we're there. So I think it does. I think it does work. But that would be a great crossover. Yeah, fuck anything I was thinking. I think that's the one. That is definitely
have you got any others that you think are like quite? Because one thing I will say, there's a lot of horror franchises, and especially horror characters that you could easily just take out from there and put them in another thing, and it almost felt too easy to say, I want to see the Cenobites from Hellraiser. I want to see them pop up in X horror film, Y horror film. One thing I do like is the vampires from 30 Days of Night. I'd quite like to see those types of vampires in other franchises. Yeah. There isn't necessarily one, like, Blade, for example. Yeah, great, let's see Blade take on them. There's something about that design and the very, very different type of vampire, almost shark-like, bordering on zombie-like. I'd quite like to see them against other teams or other characters in other settings.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I did think a good one would be like the Hellraiser universe hits Spawn, because they're not a million miles away from each other anyway.
Yeah.
But I just love, like, how would that, and I'd probably keep it comic book form rather than making it movie or TV wise, because I think a lot of the stuff that I'm guessing that they're not struggling with, but a lot of the artistic choices that they're coming up against in the new movie of Spawn is how to translate the stuff that's so important to how Spawn looks and moves in the comics into a sort of real world version of it. So I think it probably, maybe I'm taking the easy route, but taking Hellraiser into the comic book Spawn version would be a little bit of a smoother transition. But I'd love to see that. Maybe base it more in hell rather than in the real world and stuff. But I think it'd look really cool. And I think the artistic sort of choices that they make in Spawn, almost like the sketchy sort of the line, the actual drawing style, would look really good from the Hellraiser characters. Like, it almost lends itself so take Pinhead for instance. Imagine him in a sketch form. I think it'd still look great and still be really recognisable.
Yeah, and I think in that McFarlane and Capullo design type, with like the way the early character designs have like the big cape and the chains and all that, I can imagine Pinhead with like really distorted, like it's not a clean, even pin like in the film. It's like they're almost like nailed in, and there's bits coming off them, and he's got a big dramatic collar and flesh and like
and the thing is, I want to see the whole now. But like how the chains like fire out in the Hellraiser films, and then
that's very Spawn-like.
So it kind of shares sort of a sort of physicality in some ways anyway. But that could go dark quick. Nah, it'd be dark straight away. So that'd be one I'd be interested in seeing. I mean, I kind of got stuck on the whole Matrix thing and thought that Ghost in the Shell could be a precursor to the Matrix as well, because it already bridges that sort of virtual world anyway, and kind of what, not fighting for control, but because I always think with the Matrix, especially with the Animatrix, the sort of the history, Second Renaissance or Renaissance 2, Part 1 and 2, or whatever it's called, the animated one, where the humans almost kind of force the hand of the AI in a lot of ways to become the overlords. You can kind of see that a little bit in the Ghost in the Shell universe, where they're coming after the sentient AI just because they can't control it, and it's like, whoa, this is a bit unfair. This is like this new form of life, and you're just stamping it out straight away regardless. So you can almost say like, well, I wasn't wanting to be aggressive towards you, but you've left me no choice now.
I do. I think what's good about the Matrix as well, see, in my mind, I see it as the Matrix is one way the future would go, and then the Ghost in the Shell Blade Runner type is the other way it would go, where the Matrix is almost, there can't be a conscious coupling or a singularity of man and machine, and then the other ways is it is working. But then I do like the idea of, you can definitely imagine with the Matrix, we were almost working together and then it went wrong, like you say, the hand was forced. So then, and they do talk in the Matrix about how the first version was too perfect and they went back to a tougher time, which makes more sense of, let's get back to before we even started all this. Let's get back to the last time where technology was advanced enough where everything was working and really cool and the internet was coming around and stuff, but people weren't so close to basically just living in VR that seems like maybe one day.
Yeah, it was still
like
a
more
dream.
Optimistic. Yeah, I do like the idea of that. Yeah,
I mean, maybe we'll see some of this in the new Matrix film, the Matrix 4 that's coming out. I mean, I'm still really, I suppose, take one from you there. Cautiously optimistic about that, and I think the Wazowskis are, they'll take enough risks that they're going to piss a lot of people off and they're going to let down a lot of people. Yeah. But I also think that they're not worrying about pleasing everyone.
No.
If they've got a group of people who go, this is absolutely amazing, I'm so in love with what you've done with it now, they'll be like, yep, sorted. And other people go, I hate it. It's like, well, that's fine, it's not for you then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that they're going to be making decisions based on, if we've got option A, option B, and option C, and most people are going to like A, so we'll do that. It's like, no. I feel like the story's going down this route, so we're gonna carry on down there. So I'm really interested in what they're going to see. Cautiously optimistic, really, with it.
Yeah, and I think on the subject of Keanu as well, what one set of properties or franchise I thought is an obvious, easy one for a lot of crossovers is like action martial arts films and it's like John Wick, for example.
What meets the Goonies? Yeah, I'm in for that as well.
Be a very John different film. Do the truffle shuffle and then ninjas just jump in and throw knives in it. And it was like, oh my god, this got dark really quick.
Wow, the truffle shuffle definitely evolved in the times we've seen since we last saw the Goonies, hasn't it?
So like the obvious one is John Wick and Atomic Blonde. Yeah. There's people who say, it could be in the same universe. It's got some of the same creatives behind it, a lot of the same production stuff. But I'd quite like to see, and again, I think some of the cameos maybe make this harder to be a thing. But the protagonist from the Raid franchise, for example, I'd like to see him alongside John Wick.
Oh, yes, that'd be so good. That'd be great.
And not as obvious as, I know people say like, James Bond and thinking, I go, yeah, that's its own thing anyway. And there's already now question marks around James Bond seems to now basically be a code name, not a thing. And it's like, right, okay, that can cross over.
His ancestral home, and then it wasn't his, and then it's actually James. Is the ancestral home if he's adopted the mantle of James Bond and
exactly.
007,
and it's that. You can cross over.
It's got muddy in the last few years.
You can cross over within its own universe with that.
Yeah,
I'd much rather see.
And he's got a brother who's a baddie, and it's just like, we're just what? Yeah,
exactly. But again, like characters from the Raid, John Wick, Atomic Blonde, like the really physical modern martial arts films where there's a return to stunt work, practical effects, where CGI and things are used to enhance what you're seeing, not to create what you're seeing. I'd like to see a lot of that in the same.
It's like a lot of the fight scenes story. Where in John Wick, where people like absolutely praise the not cutting away from Keanu fighting, because he is at this point now, thanks to the Matrix, in large part. He is a massively competent fighter that you'll be actually hard pressed to find a stunt actor or stuntman who could do. There's a lot. That makes it sound really bad. There's a lot of people who can do what Keanu Reeves can do.
Yeah, but to couple that with the acting,
but you don't need. Yeah, you don't need the extra person to jump in to do it. But people say, there's no CGI in it. It's like, oh no, there's a lot of CGI in the John Wick franchise. What you're not understanding is that the CGI enhancements that we've talked about, there's loads of films that are not action films that have CGI enhancements. They just build the scene. They change the background. They can like age a building, or they put glass into, like, you're not going to have Keanu Reeves or anyone fighting with broken glass around them if you can help it. If you can digitally put that in afterwards and save all that risk during filming, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, exactly.
It's things like that they did during for the John Wick movies.
Yeah, and exactly, and that just makes you think. Like, imagine, eco UAs from the Raid, and John Wick goes to Indonesia, and I think that's where it's based, and just it's only a win. You're not going to take away anything from the existing franchises or properties. It doesn't even have to be a spin-off or its own little thing. It's like, no, this is the sequel. He just happens to be in this particular place and doing that.
Let's go back to the beginning of this episode. Just have them work it out like really early on that they're both on the same side.
Yeah.
Just maybe they're pitched against each other, but quite early on. You know, it's like I actually just thought then, without the love interest, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, as in they're against each other, but go, actually, you know what? To get out of this, we need to work together, even if we don't want to, and just then, and that's the first 10 minutes, and then the rest of the movie is just an absolute delight.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, get past the let's see the characters fight each other and get to let's see them fight other people together. Yeah. That's what the end result is going to be anyway. Let's get to that. You know, there can still be things to overcome and enjoy definitely. That. I mean, there's probably a ton of options out there that we've not touched on today. I think this is another one that I think we can probably get a few conversations out of it. And
definitely.
I think as we talk more in depth about other franchises and things we like, I think there'll be very clear connections to, imagine if Blade dropped in here, or, you know, imagine if the Major just dropped herself into the franchise. Like,
maybe
great.
Going forward, what we should do is whenever we are talking about a property and we think, even if we've not spoken about it before, and we think, actually, you know what, it would work really well here, we'll just mention it and see, you know, where it goes. Or if people listening to the pod think, I've actually thought that, you know, you're talking about X, Y, or Z. What would you think about this sort of crossover? Let us know. And, you know, and then rather than us having to think of topics, we'll just rip yours off instead. No? That's what you meant. That's what you meant.
Yeah, that's what I basically save us from doing any more work than we already do. Yeah. So drop us a comment below on YouTube. Let us know on Instagram. You can direct message us there. You can leave a comment below posts. And anything else to add, Charlie?
Yeah, guys, remember, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Bye.
Bye.
Hairs in my mouth, that's good. Keep that in.